The U.S. has imposed new tariffs on over 90 countries as Donald Trump's deadline for negotiating trade accords has passed. Tariffs on Canada will climb from 25% to 35%. PM Mark Carney expressed disappointment, but most Canadian commodities are exempt under a previous arrangement. Mexico's tariffs are halted for 90 days. While Brazil faces a 50% levy, Trump launched his tariff plan in April, causing global economic uncertainty. He later postponed it to allow countries, including the UK, to make arrangements. Here's a quick overview of how we got here. Trump had initially set a deadline of August 1st for countries to reach agreements before the new rates were imposed on them. However, an anonymous official told the BBC that it was necessary to wait until August 7th to enable U.S. Customs and Border Protection personnel sufficient time to fully implement these tariffs. It should not be read as a de facto extension, warned the experts. The person also stated that tariffs not included in Thursday's order are not additive. This means that Brazil will not face an additional 10% tax on top of the existing 10% rate for all countries. The 10% tax imposed on Brazil is in addition to the 40% tariff applied yesterday, according to the official, implying that Brazil stacks to 50% on most goods. Brazil now confronts one of the highest U.S. tariff rates in the world, which might start a massive trade war. Trump portrayed these tariffs as revenge for the prosecution of his supporter, right-wing former Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro. Yesterday, he also imposed fines on the judge handling Bolsonaro's corruption prosecution, according to policy analyst Deborah Elms. Welcome to Trump News. For more of us politics, hit the subscribe button and share your thoughts in the comments section. The list of revised tariffs announced today confirms that tariffs are here to stay and that U.S. President Donald Trump is serious about resetting trade. Critics had questioned the Trump administration's willingness to carry out its tariff threats, with some mockingly calling it taco, short for Trump always chickens out. There was some misunderstanding earlier, but I would say that if you missed the memo during the first 6 months of pandemonium, you can put it behind you. Today, Trump is on a quest to restructure trade, says Dr. Elms of the Heinrich Foundation, a trade research group. Trump is demonstrating that decisions are ultimately in his hands and that he will behave in unexpected ways to obtain what he wants. She claims, for example, Switzerland, which thought it had struck a better deal with the U.S., was hit with a 39% tariff rate, an indication of Trump's individualized policymaking. According to Dr. Elms, the 35% tariff rate set on Canada has officially gone into effect, and the August 1 deadline to reach an agreement with Washington has passed. However, for the remaining more than 70 countries, the new tariff rates will not take effect until August 7th. As per Trump's most recent executive order, goods loaded onto ships by August 7th, as well as those en route, will not be affected by the rates if they arrive in the United States by October 5th. We summarize Trump's new tariffs from his executive order, available on the White House website. The decree specifies levies on commodities from over 90 nations, 10% for the Falkland Islands, United Kingdom, and other countries not specified in the executive order, 15% Afghanistan, Angola, Bolivia, Botswana, Cameroon, Chad, Costa Rica, Côte d'Ivoire, Democratic Republic of the Congo, Ecuador, Equatorial Guinea, Fiji, Ghana, Guyana, Iceland, Israel, Japan, Jordan, Lesotho, Liechtenstein, Madagascar, Malawi, Mauritius, Mozambique, Namibia, Nauru, New Zealand, Nigeria, North Macedonia, Norway, Papua New Guinea, South Korea, Trinidad and Tobago, Turkey, Uganda, Vanuatu, Venezuela, Zambia, Zimbabwe. As previously stated, Canada's new higher tariff is the result of its passivity in the illicit drug crisis and retaliation against the United States for its efforts to handle the threat, according to the White House. The country has failed to cooperate in curbing the ongoing flood of fentanyl and other illicit drugs, and Trump has raised tariffs to effectively address the existing emergency, according to the report. In July, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney stated that it has achieved vital progress to stop the scourge of fentanyl in North America. The White House statement adds that items covered by the United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, USMCA, are excluded from the 35% tax. On Thursday, Trump stunned New Zealand with a 15% tariff, up from the 10% he had warned in April. According to local media, Trade Minister Todd McClay claims that New Zealand has been unfairly penalized due to a tiny trade deficit with the U.S. The U.S. announced an updated list of levies on Thursday. It appears it has been done based upon countries that have a trade deficit with the U.S., who sell them more than they buy, claims McClay in New Zealand's case. That's about $500 million US, and in a scheme the size of the U.S. economy, it's really not significant or meaningful. McClay says he's requested a chat with U.S. Ambassador and trade negotiator Jamieson Greer and expects to meet with him this weekend to start making a case for a reduced levy. South Korea has achieved a 15% tariff rate on most commodities, including automobiles. Its main export to the United States. More than half of South Korean automobiles sold abroad go to the United States. And the industry was struck severely when President Trump first imposed 25% tariffs on it in April. Hyundai's profits fell 16% last quarter compared to the previous year. Despite the lower tariff rate, Hyundai and Kia's share prices fell following the announcement, given that South Korea and the United States previously had a free trade deal. U.S. consumers will most certainly continue to pay more for their cars than they did last year. Nonetheless, there is immense relief here. The outcome may have been much worse critically. The 15% rate puts South Korea on same footing with Japan and the EU, both of whom have obtained 15% tariffs on autos. That implies Hyundai and Kia can now compete with Toyota and BMW, despite their previous edge. When Trump announced his significant tariffs on April 2nd, the shock was felt most acutely in Southeast Asia, where the entire worldview and economic model is based on exports. Some countries face taxes of up to 49%, affecting a wide range of businesses, from electronics exporters in Thailand and Vietnam to chip makers in Malaysia and apparel manufacturing in Cambodia. The negotiations went down to the wire, with the agreement reached only 2 days before Trump's deadline of August 1st. Thailand, which was facing a 36% levy, has agreed, along with the majority of its neighbors, to decrease tariffs to 19%. The negotiations went down to the wire, with the agreement reached only 2 days before Trump's deadline of August 1st. It has been a difficult journey to get there, and there is still a lack of clarity about what has been agreed upon. Australia looks to have avoided a tariff increase. Its Trade Minister Don Farrell claims that no other country has received a lower tariff than what the White House promised it. He did not provide a final figure, but it appears that Australia will face a 10% import charge, which is consistent with the first rate set by U.S. President Donald Trump in April. A representative for Farrell stated that Canberra officials will continue to press for the elimination of all tariffs in accordance with our free trade agreement. However, neighboring New Zealand has not fared so well. Its tariff rate has been increased from the previously announced 10% to 15% as nations around the world cope with Trump's new tariff policy. One country stands out: China. There are indications that Beijing wants a deal. It sent officials to 3 different sets of talks, the first in Geneva in May, the second in London in June, and the third earlier this week in Stockholm. The 2 sides have agreed to seek a 90-day extension of their truce, which is set to expire on August 12. Beijing will seek a continued suspension of U.S. export controls on technology, such as semiconductors, in exchange for a consistent supply of rare earth minerals. The U.S. will most likely push for efforts to limit fentanyl production. Trump will also seek greater access to Chinese markets, Chinese purchases of U.S. goods and agriculture, and increased Chinese investment in the United States. "We're keeping up with China. We're doing well with China," Trump told reporters at the White House on Wednesday. "I think we're going to have a very fair deal with China." It is thought that Beijing and Washington are preparing for a summit between their leaders later this year. Trump has stated that he believes he will meet Chinese President Xi Jinping before the end of the year. Here's some more from U.S. President Donald Trump, who, as previously mentioned, has been speaking with NBC News. He told the news outlet that the tariff rollout is going very well, very smoothly, addressing the countries that have yet to negotiate deals with the U.S. He stated that it is now too late to reach an agreement before new tariff rates go into effect. It doesn't mean that somebody doesn't come along in 4 weeks and say we can make some kind of a deal, he told reporters. When asked about price increases for U.S. consumers, he replied the only price that's risen is the hundreds of billions of dollars coming in. He was also asked about Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, who has vowed to oppose Trump's tariff agenda. "That's okay, but he doesn't have to do business with the United States, which is fine with me," said Trump in an interview with NBC News. Trump said that he's open to continued trade talks with Canada. He added that he may still speak over the phone with Canadian PM Mark Carney tonight, but he added that it's too late for Canada to negotiate a deal before the new tariff of 35% comes into effect. As a reminder, the White House has said Canada's higher tariffs come because it failed to cooperate in curbing the ongoing flood of fentanyl, a claim the Canadian Bureau of Commerce has denied. Donald Trump has attributed the 35% tariff he imposed on Canada in part to its inaction on the flow of illegal drugs across its border with the U.S. But the Canadian Bureau of Commerce has come out swinging against these claims. The White House fact sheet should be called a factless sheet when it comes to basing trade decisions about Canada on the fentanyl emergency, its chief Candice Lang said. She backed the Carney government's prioritization of a strong, future-focused deal over a rushed one, adding a little more time now can deliver lasting benefits for an integrated North American economy, and that's well worth the wait. Major stock markets in Asia are trading lower after Trump's latest tariff salvo. The biggest drop is on South Korea's Kospi index. It's down by more than 3% as investors digest the latest announcement. Elsewhere in the region, Japan's Nikkei 225 is down by approximately 0.4%, and the ASX 200 in Australia is 0.7% lower. Hong Kong's Hang Seng and the Shanghai Composite in mainland China are bucking the trend, up roughly 0.2%. The North American neighbors are among each other's top trading partners, but have been in an uncomfortable standoff as Trump returned to the White House earlier this year and unleashed a comprehensive campaign of tariffs. About 3/4 of the commodities Canada exports are sold to the U.S. In addition to metals and lumber, Canada exports enormous quantities of oil, vehicles and car parts, other machinery, food and pharmaceuticals. According to the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative, in 2024 the U.S. exported about $350 billion, £258 billion in commodities to Canada, and purchased more than $412 billion from its northern neighbor. But despite the billions of dollars in trade, Canadian authorities have hinted that they would rather have no deal than a bad deal. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney signaled earlier this month that Canada will not accept a bad deal and hurry toward an agreement. After a 2-day visit to Washington, Intergovernmental Affairs Minister Dominic LeBlanc told reporters last week that negotiators have a lot of work in front of them.